The crimson sunset painted the sky as Lena Tucker stood at the dry creek bed, her tears falling onto cracked earth that had once flowed with life-giving water. Her shoulders shook as she clutched a withered wildflower, the last remnant from her husband's grave. She didn't hear the approach of hoofbeats until a shadow fell across the barren stream bed. "Been dry for months now," came a deep voice behind her. "But there's still water somewhere ahead." Lena whirled around, hastily wiping tears from her cheeks. The stranger sat atop a chestnut mare, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Dust covered his denim and leather, telling the story of many miles traveled. "What would you know of it?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. The cowboy dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. "Owen Norwood," he said simply, extending a calloused hand. "And I know water, been tracking it all my life. Nebraska Territory, 1859. Mineral Point had once been a promising settlement nestled in the fertile valley where two creeks met. Now one creek was bone dry, and the other was fading fast. Along with it, so were Lena's hopes for saving the small farm her husband James had died trying to build. "Lena Tucker," she replied, hesitantly taking his hand. "And what I know is that without water everything dies, my crops, my livestock, everything my husband worked for." Owen's eyes, blue as a clear winter sky, studied the cracked earth. "The water's gone underground, madam. Happens sometimes after earthquakes, even small ones." "There wasn't any earthquake," Lena said, "not one you'd feel, but the earth shifts in subtle ways." He crouched down, running his fingers through the dusty creek bed. "Your husband been gone long, 6 months, Lena's voice caught. "Fever took him. Doctor said it was the bad water from the well when the creek first started failing." Owen nodded solemnly. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Tucker. Just Lena," she corrected, surprised at herself. "Everyone left in town calls me Lena. Not many left, I take it." Lena shook her head. "Most packed up when the creek started drying, said it was an omen. The rest left when their fields wouldn't yield." She looked toward the horizon where her small homestead stood, a lonely sentinel against the vast prairie. "I'm the last one trying to make something work." Owen stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "Mind if I water my horse at whatever well you've got left?" "Been riding since dawn." Lena hesitated. Strangers weren't always welcome in these parts, especially with so many desperate people roaming since the Panic of '57 had left so many destitute. But something in the cowboy's straightforward manner put her at ease. "This way," she said, turning toward home. "I've got a bit of water left, not much but enough to share." As they walked the half-mile back to her homestead, Lena felt the stranger's eyes on her back. Not in the way that made her uncomfortable, but with a keen assessment that seemed to be sizing up more than just her. "Your land looks good," Owen commented as they approached the small farmhouse James had built with his own hands. "Good soil, just needs water." "Everything needs water," Lena replied. "That's the problem." The farm was modest, a 2-room cabin, a small barn that housed her one remaining milk cow and 2 chickens, and fields that were more dust than crops. What had once been promising rows of corn and wheat were now withered stalks and empty dirt. Owen led his horse to the small trough near the well and pumped a meager amount of water into it. The horse drank gratefully. "How long before the well runs dry?" he asked without looking up. Lena leaned against the porch post. "A month, maybe less with this heat." Owen nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Mrs. Tucker, Lena, I've been tracking water sources for 15 years. Started when I was just 18, working with an old Pawnee tracker who taught me to read the land. I believe there's a water source on your property that hasn't been tapped." Lena's heart fluttered with a hope she immediately tried to extinguish. "James dug 3 wells, Only one had water, and even that's failing. He dug where convention says to dig. I'm talking about something else. Owen straightened up and looked her in the eye. For a fair price, I could find it for you. Fair price, Lena repeated with a bitter laugh. I have nothing to pay you with, Mr. Norwood. Owen, he corrected with the hint of a smile, and I wasn't thinking of money. Lena stiffened. She'd had her share of offers from men passing through offers that made her skin crawl and her hand reach for James's old shotgun. Owen seemed to read her thoughts. A place to stay for a few weeks while I work, meals, and if I find water, a small percentage of your first successful crop. That's all. Lena studied him carefully. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30. His eyes were clear, his manner direct. There was nothing in his countenance that raised alarm. And if you don't find water, she asked, then I'll be on my way, no harm done except I'll have taken up some of your supplies. He shrugged. It's a gamble, but one I'm willing to make. Are you? Lena looked out over her failing farm. Without water, she had weeks, maybe a month before she'd have to abandon everything. She had nowhere to go, no family to return to. This land, this home, was all she had left of James and the dream they'd shared. You can sleep in the barn, she decided. I'll feed you, but simply. And you'll work while you're here, not just looking for your mythical water source, but helping with the chores. Owen's smile was warm as sunrise. Yes, madam, you've got yourself a deal. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the barn where the stranger had made his bed in the hayloft. 1,000 doubts plagued her. Was she a fool to trust him? What did a wandering cowboy really want with her failing farm? But as the stars wheeled overhead, one thought kept returning. There's still water somewhere ahead. For the first time in months, Lena allowed herself to hope. The next morning, Owen was already up and had milked Bessie, the cow, when Lena emerged from the cabin. She blinked in surprise at the full milk pail on the porch. Good morning, Owen called from where he was repairing a loose board on the chicken coop. Hope you don't mind. Figured I'd make myself useful. Thank you, Lena said, still not entirely comfortable with his presence. She took the milk inside and prepared a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush with a small dollop of precious butter. When Owen came in to eat, he set a folded piece of paper on the table. A contract, he explained. Simple terms, written plain. I believe in having things clear between folks. Lena read it carefully. The terms were exactly as he'd stated: room and board for up to 3 weeks while he searched for water, help with farm chores, and a 10% share of her first successful harvest if he found water. You write very well for a cowboy, she observed. Owen's eyes crinkled. My mother was a school teacher. She made sure I could read and write proper before she passed. And your father, railroad man, died in a tunnel collapse when I was 14. Owen took a bite of the mush. This is good, thank you. Lena signed the contract with the stub of pencil he provided, then watched as he added his own signature. His handwriting was indeed neat and precise, not what she'd expected. So, she said, folding her hands, how do you propose to find this water? First, I'll walk the property. Get a feel for the land. Owen pushed his empty bowl away. The water's speaking if you know how to listen. Lena raised an eyebrow. The water speaks, figure of speech, he said with a smile, but yes, in a way. The presence of certain plants, the way the ground lies, even the behavior of animals can tell you where water flows beneath the surface. After breakfast, Lena watched from the porch as Owen walked her property, sometimes kneeling to examine the soil or a plant, other times standing still with his eyes closed as if listening to something only he could hear. By midday, he'd covered the 20 acres that constituted her homestead. When he returned, his face was thoughtful. Well, Lena asked, trying not to sound too eager. Your husband picked good land, Owen said, accepting the cup of water she offered measured carefully from her dwindling supply. There's a natural depression running from the northwest corner down toward what used to be the creek. I believe there's an underground stream there, probably flowing from the foothills. If there's water underground, why can't we reach it from the well? Owen shook his head. Your well taps a different source, a surface aquifer that's being depleted faster than it can refill because of the drought. What I'm talking about is deeper, more reliable. And how do we reach it? We dig, Owen said simply, but not a traditional well. We need to intercept the flow where it's closest to the surface. He smiled at her skepticism. I know it sounds like wishful thinking, but I've done this before. In California during the gold rush, in Colorado for ranchers. Water finding is my trade. Lena wanted to believe him. The alternative was watching her farm die a slow death under the merciless sun. All right, she said. Where do we start? For the next 3 days, Owen and Lena worked side by side. He marked out a spot about 400 yards from the house, where the land dipped slightly before rising toward the distant hills. Here, he'd said confidently. The water's running about 15 feet down at this point. Together they dug. It was backbreaking work, especially in the heat. Lena's hands, already calloused from farm work, developed new blisters that broke and healed and broke again. Owen worked tirelessly, removing his shirt as the sun climbed higher, revealing a torso hardened by years of physical labor. Lena found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. It had been a long time since she'd been this close to a man, working in tandem toward a common goal. James had been gone almost a year now, if she counted the months he'd been sick before passing. The loneliness had become such a constant companion that she'd nearly forgotten what it was like to have someone to talk to. In the evenings, exhausted from digging, they would sit on her porch and watch the sunset. Owen told stories of his travels, of the great redwood forests in California, the soaring Rocky Mountains, the vast plains where buffalo still roamed in diminishing numbers. How did you learn to find water? Lena asked on the 4th night, as they shared a simple supper of rabbit stew. Owen had snared the rabbit that morning. Necessity at first, he replied, his eyes distant with memory. After my mother died, I headed west with nothing but the clothes on my back and her Bible in my pocket. Got work with a wagon train as a general hand. We got lost in the desert. Guide had bad maps, running out of water fast. He paused, stirring his stew. There was an old Pawnee scout with us, silent type, kept to himself. One night when everyone was panicking, he just got up and started walking. I followed him, curious. He found water that night, a spring hidden in the rocks that no one else had spotted, saved the whole party. And he taught you? Lena asked, drawn into the story. Owen nodded. Not willingly at first. I pestered him something fierce. Finally, he said if I was going to follow him around like a lost pup, I might as well learn something. Spent 3 years with him, traveling from Colorado to California and back, finding water for settlements, ranches, mining operations. What happened to him? A shadow crossed Owen's face. Caught a bullet in a saloon fight in Dodge City. Wasn't even his fight, just got in the way when a drunk cowhand started shooting. He set down his empty bowl. After that, I kept moving, never stayed in one place too long. And now, Lena asked softly. Owen met her gaze. Now I'm here, digging a hole with a stubborn widow who refuses to give up on her land. Lena felt her cheeks warm. I'm not stubborn, just determined. Same thing, Owen said with a smile, and I admire it. The next day they hit rocky soil that slowed their progress considerably. By evening, both were discouraged and exhausted. Maybe you were wrong, Lena said as they sat on the edge of the large hole they dug, now about 10 feet deep. Maybe there's no water here at all. Owen wiped sweat from his brow. It's here, I can feel it. He looked up at the darkening sky. We'll rest tonight and start again tomorrow. Sometimes you have to go deeper than you expect. That night, Lena had trouble sleeping again, but for different reasons. Owen's presence had shifted from a curiosity to a comfort in just a few days. His steady determination gave her strength when her own flagged. The way he spoke about the land, about water, about life, it resonated with something inside her that had been dormant since James died. She pushed the thoughts away. It was foolish to develop feelings for a drifter, a man who by his own admission never stayed in one place for long. Once he found water, if he found water, he would collect his percentage and move on. That was the agreement. The fifth day brought breakthrough, though not the kind they'd hoped for. As Owen was working at the bottom of their excavation, now nearly 14 feet deep, there was a sudden shift in the soil. A section of the wall collapsed, partially burying him. Lena screamed his name, scrambling down the rope ladder they'd fashioned. "I'm all right," came Owen's muffled voice as he pushed dirt away from his face. "Just caught me by surprise." But when he tried to stand, he winced in pain. "My ankle. Think it's twisted, maybe worse." With great effort, Lena helped him climb out of the hole. He leaned heavily on her as they made their slow way back to the house. "I need to look at that ankle," she said as she helped him onto the porch. "It's nothing," Owen insisted, but his face was pale with pain. "Don't be stubborn," Lena said firmly, echoing his words from the night before. "Let me help you." Inside, she helped him to her bed, the only proper bed in the house, and carefully removed his boot. His ankle was already swelling, turning an angry purplish red. "It's not broken," Owen said, examining it himself. "Just a bad sprain. I'll be back digging in a day or two." "Not if you want it to heal properly," Lena countered, wrapping the injured ankle in strips of clean cloth soaked in cool well water. "You'll stay off it for at least a week." Owen's frustration was evident. "We don't have a week. Your contract only gives me 3 weeks total, and we're already 5 days in without finding water." Lena sat on the edge of the bed, her hand still resting lightly on his bandaged ankle. "The contract can wait. Your health can't." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of concern that went beyond their business arrangement. "Thank you," Owen said quietly. For the next 3 days, Owen was confined to the bed or the porch, his ankle propped up as Lena had instructed. She tended to him between her regular chores, bringing meals, changing the cold compresses on his ankle, and sometimes just sitting with him as the evening cooled the prairie air. They talked more during those days than they had while working. Owen told her about the places he'd seen, the people he'd met. Lena shared stories of her childhood in Illinois, of meeting James at a church social, of their journey west to stake a claim in the Nebraska Territory. "He was a good man," Lena said one evening as they watched the first stars appear. "Kind, hardworking, he had such dreams for this place." "You loved him very much," Owen observed. Lena nodded, her throat tight. "I did. When he died, I thought I'd die too, from grief, from loneliness." She looked out at the darkening fields. "But then I got angry. Angry at God, at fate, at the drought, and anger kept me going when love couldn't." Owen was quiet for a moment. "Anger's a powerful fuel," he finally said, "but it burns you up inside if you let it burn too long." "What would you suggest instead?" Lena asked, turning to face him. In the fading light, his eyes were intense. "Hope," he said simply. "Hope is what gets me out of bed each morning. Hope that over the next hill, around the next bend, I'll find something worth finding." "And have you," Lena asked softly, "found something worth finding?" Owen held her gaze. "I'm beginning to think so." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibility. Then Lena stood abruptly. "I should check on Bessie. It's getting late." As she hurried toward the barn, her heart pounded in her chest. It was too soon, too complicated. Owen would leave once his job was done, if it could be done at all. Opening her heart again would only invite more pain. By the time Owen's ankle was healed enough for him to resume work, nearly 8 days had passed. They had less than 2 weeks left according to their contract, and the well was running dangerously low. The heat showed no signs of abating, and Lena had begun to ration water severely. "We need to try a different approach," Owen said as they stood beside their abandoned excavation, now partially filled with soil from further collapses. "This spot is too unstable." "But you were so sure the water was here," Lena said, disappointment clear in her voice. "It is here," Owen insisted. "Just not exactly where I thought. We need to move about 20 yards that way." He pointed west. "The soil should be more stable, and I think the water channel bends in that direction anyway." They began again, digging more carefully this time, shoring up the walls with timber as they went. Owen's injury slowed them down, but his determination never wavered. Each day they dug deeper, and each night they collapsed into exhausted sleep, Owen in the barn, Lena in her bed, though she found herself increasingly wishing for his company. On the 15th day since Owen's arrival, disaster struck. The remaining well, the one that supplied the house and animals, began to produce cloudy, foul-smelling water. "It's the same as before James got sick," Lena said, her voice tight with fear as she showed Owen the bucket of discolored water. "The well is failing completely." Owen examined the water, dipping his fingers in and bringing them to his nose. "Sulfur," he said grimly. "The water table has dropped so low that you're getting contamination from mineral deposits." "What do we do?" Lena asked, panic rising, "without any clean water?" "We keep digging," Owen said firmly. "But we need to work faster. Do you have any neighbors left who might help?" Lena shook her head. "The nearest family is 10 miles south and they're struggling too." "Then it's just us," Owen said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We can do this, Lena. I know we can." That night, they took stock of their situation. They had enough clean water stored in barrels to last about 5 days if they were extremely careful. The cow and chickens would need water too, further depleting their supply. "If we don't find water by then." Lena couldn't finish the sentence. "We will," Owen said with quiet conviction. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we dig like our lives depend on it." "They do," Lena whispered. The next morning they were at the new excavation site before dawn. They worked in tandem, one digging while the other hauled up buckets of soil. By midday, they were already deeper than they'd managed in the previous attempt. As the sun reached its zenith, blazing down on them with merciless heat, Owen paused in his digging. He stood very still at the bottom of the hole, now nearly 16 feet deep. "What is it?" Lena called down, wiping sweat from her forehead. Owen didn't answer immediately. He crouched down, pressing his palm flat against the soil. Then he looked up, and even from a distance, Lena could see the excitement in his eyes. "The soil's changing," he called up. "Getting damper. And there's a smell. Can you smell it?" Lena leaned over the edge of the excavation. There was indeed a different scent rising from the depths, earthy, fresh, with a hint of something mineral. "Water," she breathed. Owen nodded, already digging again with renewed vigor. "We're close. Very close." They worked through the afternoon without stopping, taking turns at the digging. The soil was indeed becoming more moist, clinging to their tools in heavy clumps rather than falling away as dry dust. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Owen's shovel hit something hard. He paused, then carefully scraped away the surrounding soil. A dark crevice appeared in the rocky bottom of their excavation. "Lena," Owen called up, his voice tense with excitement. "I need you down here." She climbed down the ladder quickly, joining him at the bottom. Owen pointed to the small fissure he'd uncovered. "Watch," he said, and gently pressed his fingers into the surrounding soil. A small trickle of water seeped from the crevice, glistening in the fading light. Lena's breath caught. "Is that?" "Yes," Owen confirmed, his face split in a wide grin. "That's what we've been looking for. An underground stream, just like I said." Lena stared at the tiny flow of water, hardly daring to believe. "But it's so small." "For now," Owen said. "We need to widen the opening carefully, create a collection point. The pressure will increase once we give it room to flow." He looked up at her, his eyes bright. "We found it, Lena. We found your water." In that moment, overcome with relief and joy, Lena did something she hadn't planned. She threw her arms around Owen's neck and kissed him. The kiss took them both by surprise. It was brief, impulsive, but when Lena pulled back, Owen's expression had changed. The excitement over their discovery was still there, but now mingled with something else, a wondering, questioning look that made Lena's cheeks flush hot. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I was just so happy." Owen shook his head, cutting off her apology. "Don't be sorry," he said softly. Then, more deliberately this time, he leaned forward and returned her kiss. This second kiss was different, not a spontaneous outburst, but a conscious choice. Lena felt herself responding, her hands finding their way to Owen's shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, and not just from their labor. "We should." Lena began, uncertain how to proceed. "Focus on the water," Owen finished for her, though his eyes lingered on her face. "You're right. We need to secure this source before we celebrate too much." They worked until nightfall, carefully widening the fissure in the rock and creating a small basin where the water could collect. As Owen had predicted, the flow increased steadily as they worked, until a clear stream was running continuously, pooling in their makeshift basin. Owen filled a canteen with the water and handed it to Lena. "Taste it," he urged. She took a tentative sip, then a larger drink. The water was cool and sweet, with none of the bitter mineral taste that had contaminated the well. "It's perfect," she said, passing the canteen back to Owen, who drank deeply. "Now we need to build a proper structure around this," he said, his practical nature reasserting itself. "A covered well with a pump that can bring the water to the surface. We'll need to redirect some of the flow to create a reservoir for irrigation too." "How long will that take?" Lena asked. Owen considered. "With just the two of us working, at least a week for the basics." "Longer to set up irrigation channels." Lena nodded slowly. "The contract only gives you another week." "Forget the contract," Owen said. "I'm not leaving until this job is finished properly. You need this water system to work for years, not just until the next dry spell." They climbed out of the excavation, both filthy but elated. In the starlight, they walked back to the house, closer than they had been before, occasionally letting their hands brush against each other. On the porch, they paused. The moment stretched between them, full of new possibilities. "Lena," Owen began, his voice unusually hesitant, "about what happened down there." "It's been a long day," Lena said quickly, suddenly unsure. "We should get some rest." Owen studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "You're right, tomorrow will be busy." He turned toward the barn, then looked back. "But Lena, I'm not sorry it happened." As she watched him walk toward the barn, Lena pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. "Neither am I," she whispered to herself. The next week passed in a blur of activity. Owen designed an ingenious well structure that not only brought water to the surface, but also diverted some of the flow into a storage tank for irrigation. They worked from sunrise to sunset, stopping only for brief meals and to tend to the essential farm chores. Word of their discovery spread quickly to neighboring farms. 3 days after they found water, the Abernathy family from 10 miles south arrived with their wagon, asking if they could fill their barrels. "Of course," Lena said without hesitation. "Take what you need, Mrs. Abernathy." A thin woman worn down by hard times grasped Lena's hands in gratitude. "We heard a water finder was working with you," she said, glancing at Owen, who was helping Mr. Abernathy fill their barrels. "Think he might look at our place when he's done here." Lena felt a sudden tightness in her chest at the thought of Owen leaving to work elsewhere. "You'd have to ask him," she said carefully. More families came in the following days. News of water in a drought was like a beacon, drawing people from miles around. Owen treated them all the same, offering advice, sometimes walking their land briefly to give an assessment, but always returning to Lena's farm to continue their work. "You could make good money helping these other farms," Lena observed one evening as they sat on her porch, tired but satisfied with the day's progress. Owen shrugged. "Money's not everything. I gave you my word I'd finish this job right." Lena studied his profile in the fading light. "And after? Where will you go next?" Owen was silent for a long moment. "I haven't decided," he finally said. "For the first time in a long while, I'm not in a hurry to move on." Their eyes met, and the connection between them, growing stronger each day, seemed to vibrate in the air. Since that impulsive kiss in the well, they hadn't spoken directly about their feelings, but every look, every accidental touch, every shared smile spoke volumes. "Owen," Lena began, gathering her courage, "I need to say something." He turned to face her fully, his expression open, waiting. "When James died, I thought that part of my life was over, the part where I shared things with someone, where I wasn't alone." She took a deep breath. "I didn't expect to feel this again." "This?" Owen prompted gently. Lena met his gaze squarely. "This pull towards someone. This wanting to be near them, to know what they're thinking, to see their smile first thing in the morning and last thing at night." Owen reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I've been a drifter most of my adult life," he said. "Never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. Always told myself that was how I wanted it, freedom, no attachments." He paused, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. "But being here, working this land with you, it's made me question things I thought I knew about myself." "What things?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Whether a life on the move is really what I want anymore." His eyes, sincere and direct, held hers. "Whether there might be someone worth staying for." Lena's heart hammered in her chest. "Owen, I don't want you to feel obligated because of our agreement or because you feel sorry for a widow woman." "Stop," he said firmly. "That's not what this is, not even close." He lifted his free hand to gently touch her cheek. "Lena, you're the strongest, most determined woman I've ever met. You held on when everyone else gave up. You fought for this land, for your husband's dream. How could I not admire that? How could I not find myself drawn to you?" Lena leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of feeling this way again. Scared of losing someone again." "Life doesn't come with guarantees," Owen said softly. "We both know that too well. But sometimes you have to take a chance on something good, even if it's uncertain." In the growing darkness, they moved closer together. This time when they kissed, there was no surprise, no hesitation, only a mutual recognition of something that had been building between them since that first day by the dry creek bed. When they finally drew apart, Lena rested her forehead against Owen's. "Stay," she whispered. "Not just until the well is finished. Stay with me." Owen's arms tightened around her. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Lena nodded, her decision made. "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time." "Then yes," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll stay." The next morning, they awoke to the sound of hoofbeats approaching the farm. Lena, who had insisted Owen take the bed while she slept on a pallet in the main room. "Your ankle needs proper rest," she'd claimed, though both knew it was more about propriety, rose quickly to peer out the window. A group of 5 riders was approaching men she didn't recognize, their expressions grim. "Owen," she called urgently, "we have company." He joined her at the window, buttoning his shirt hastily, his brow furrowed as he studied the approaching riders. "Stay inside," he said, his tone shifting to something harder than she'd heard before. "I'll handle this." "Who are they?" "Trouble," Owen said grimly, reaching for his gun belt which hung on a peg by the door. "Do you have James's shotgun loaded?" Lena nodded, fear climbing up her throat. "In the corner cabinet. Get it out, but stay inside unless I call for you." Owen buckled on his gun belt and stepped onto the porch just as the riders drew up in front of the house. From inside, Lena could hear the conversation clearly. "Morning, gentlemen," Owen said, his voice casual but with an underlying tension. "What brings you out this way?" The lead rider, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, leaned forward in his saddle. "You Owen Norwood?" "Depends who's asking." "Name's Burke, Thaddeus Burke." The man's voice was rough, like gravel underfoot. "I represent certain interests in the county that are concerned about water rights." "Is that so?" Owen's posture remained relaxed, but Lena could see his hand resting near his holstered gun. Burke nodded. "Word is you found water on this property." "Significant water." "The lady who owns this land found water," Owen corrected. "I just helped with the digging." Burke exchanged glances with his companions. "Here's the situation, Norwood. My employer, Mr. Randall, owns most of the water rights in this county. He's willing to pay fair market value for this property, including the new water source." Lena's hand tightened on the shotgun. Edwin Randall was known throughout the territory, a wealthy rancher who had been buying up failing farms during the drought, expanding his already vast holdings. "That's not my decision to make," Owen replied evenly. "This is Mrs. Tucker's property." Burke's face hardened. "Thing is, Norwood, this ain't really a request. Mr. Randall gets what he wants in these parts, one way or another." The threat hung in the air. Lena had heard enough. Shotgun in hand, she pushed open the door and stepped onto the porch beside Owen. "This is my land, Mr. Burke," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's not for sale. Not to Mr. Randall, not to anyone." Burke's eyes narrowed as they shifted to her. "Mrs. Tucker, I presume?" "With all due respect, madam, you might want to reconsider. A widow woman alone can face all sorts of difficulties. Accidents happen." Owen took a half step forward, his hand now resting openly on his holstered gun. "She's not alone," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And the only accident that's going to happen here is if you and your friends don't turn around and ride out the way you came in." The tension stretched between them. A wire pulled taut. Lena could feel her pulse pounding in her throat. Finally, Burke shrugged, though his eyes remained cold. "Have it your way, for now." He turned his horse, then looked back over his shoulder. "But this ain't over. Mr. Randall doesn't take no for an answer. Think on his offer, it won't get better, only worse." The riders departed in a cloud of dust. Lena and Owen watched until they disappeared over the rise. "Will they be back?" Lena asked, finally lowering the shotgun. Owen nodded grimly. "Count on it. Men like Randall don't give up easily when there's something they want." "What do we do?" Owen turned to her, his face resolute. "We finish the well, get your irrigation set up, and make this farm so prosperous that not even Randall can force you off it." He paused. "And I think we should ride into town, talk to the marshal about what just happened." Lena hadn't been to Mineral Point proper in over a month, not since before Owen arrived. The small town had suffered from the drought as much as the outlying farms, But as they rode in together the next day, Lena was surprised to see signs of renewed activity. "Word about the water has reached town too," Owen observed, as they passed a group of men repairing the roof of a building that had stood abandoned all summer. Marshal Everett listened gravely to their account of Burke's visit. A tall man with a salt and pepper beard, he'd been the law in Mineral Point since its founding. "Randall's been getting bolder," he acknowledged when they finished. "Started with buying up farms fair and square, but lately there've been rumors about pressure tactics." He stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Problem is, without anyone willing to swear out a formal complaint, my hands are tied." "We're making a complaint right now," Lena said firmly. The marshal shook his head. "They haven't actually done anything illegal yet. Made some veiled threats, sure, but that's not enough for me to act on." His expression softened. "I'll keep an eye out, send a deputy to ride by your place regular-like. Best I can do for now." It wasn't the response they'd hoped for, but it was better than nothing. As they left the marshal's office, Owen placed a protective hand at the small of Lena's back. "We'll be all right," he assured her. "I'm not about to let Randall or his men scare us off." Lena was struck by his use of us. In just weeks, Owen had gone from a stranger to a partner in her struggle. The thought warmed her despite their troubles. They completed their business in town, purchasing supplies for the well and irrigation system. As they loaded their wagon, Lena noticed a group of men watching them from across the street. "Don't look now," she said quietly, "but I think we're being observed." Owen glanced casually in the direction she indicated. "Burke's men," he confirmed. "They're letting us know we're being watched." "It's intimidation," Lena said, anger rising in her. "Yes," Owen agreed. "But it also means they're not ready to do anything more drastic yet. They're still hoping we'll cave to pressure." They drove back to the farm in tense silence, both scanning the horizon frequently for signs of followers. But the road remained clear, and by the time they reached the homestead, Lena's nerves had settled somewhat. As days passed, they fell into a rhythm. Mornings were spent working on the well and the beginnings of an irrigation system. Afternoons were dedicated to preparing the fields for a late planting. The newly available water meant they might yet salvage a crop before winter. Evenings were for planning, talking, and increasingly, for tender moments stolen on the porch under the stars. A week after Burke's visit, they received unexpected help. The Abernathy family arrived with their wagon, Mr. Abernathy and his 2 grown sons offering their labor in exchange for water and the promise that Owen would assess their property next. "We heard about Randall's men coming around, Mrs. Abernathy confided to Lena as they prepared lunch for the working men. "John said we should stick together, small farmers against the big interests." "We appreciate the help," Lena said sincerely. With the additional manpower, the work progressed rapidly. The well structure was completed, a hand pump installed, and the beginnings of irrigation channels dug toward the fields. Other neighboring farmers came too, offering labor, bringing food, sharing news. Word had spread about Randall's interest in Lena's newly discovered water source, and many saw her resistance as a stand for all small farmers against wealthy land grabbers. "You've become a symbol," Owen told her one evening as they sat on the porch after a long day of work. "These people needed something to rally around, and you gave it to them." Lena shook her head. "I'm just trying to keep my home." Owen took her hand, his expression serious. "It's more than that now. You're showing them it's possible to fight back, to find solutions instead of giving up." The community support was heartening, but Burke and his men remained a constant, if distant, presence. They were spotted watching the farm from the hills, and occasionally riders would pass by slowly, making no attempt to hide their surveillance. "They're waiting for the neighbors to leave," Owen said grimly. Once we're alone again, they'll make another move. He was right. The day after the Abernathys and the last of the neighboring farmers departed, having helped complete the main irrigation channels, Burke and his men returned. This time, there were more of them, 10 riders in all, spreading out in a half-circle before the house as Lena and Owen returned from the fields. "Mrs. Tucker," Burke called, his tone falsely pleasant. "Mr. Randall has authorized me to increase his offer. Double the market value of your land, cash in hand today." Lena straightened her back, conscious of Owen standing protectively beside her. "As I told you before, Mr. Burke, this land is not for sale." Burke's smile faded. "That's unfortunate. Especially since we've discovered some irregularities with your claim filing." He pulled a folded document from his vest pocket. "Seems your late husband filed the southeast corner improperly. That 20 acres, which happens to include your new well, is actually unclaimed territory." Owen stepped forward. "That's a lie. I've seen the original claim papers." "Have you now?" Burke's smile was cold. "Well, the Territorial Land Office might see things differently, especially with affidavits from witnesses who'll swear the borders were mismarked." "This is theft," Lena said, her voice shaking with anger. "Pure and simple." Burke shrugged. "It's business, Mrs. Tucker. Mr. Randall has filed a claim on the disputed territory, effective immediately. His men will be arriving tomorrow to begin work on his portion of the property which, as I mentioned, includes your new well." "You can't do this," Owen said, his hand moving toward his gun. Burke nodded to his men, who all drew their weapons in unison. "I wouldn't try anything foolish, Norwood. There are 10 of us and 1 of you. Even if you're as fast as they say, those odds don't favor you." Lena placed a restraining hand on Owen's arm. "We'll take this to the marshal," she said to Burke. "To the territorial court if necessary." "By all means," Burke replied, seeming unconcerned. "But courts take time, and meanwhile possession is 9/10 of the law. We'll be taking possession tomorrow." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day, Mrs. Tucker." As the riders departed, Owen kicked at the dirt in frustration. "He's bluffing about the claim papers. He has to be." "Even if he is, he's right about the courts," Lena said, her mind racing. "It could take months to resolve, and in the meantime, they'll control the water." Owen paced the yard, thinking hard. "We need to buy time. If they come tomorrow with enough men, they can simply overwhelm us." He stopped suddenly, a determined look crossing his face. "I need to ride to town. Now." "What are you thinking?" Lena asked. "I'm thinking we need allies," Owen replied, already moving toward the barn to saddle his horse. "And I know where to find them." "I'm coming with you," Lena decided, following him. Owen shook his head. "Someone needs to stay here, make sure Burke's men don't decide to move in early." "And what am I supposed to do if they do?" Lena demanded. "You said yourself I can't stop them alone." Owen paused in saddling his horse, considering. "You're right," he conceded. "We go together. But we need to leave now if we're going to make it to town and back before dark." They rode hard, pushing their horses to a gallop once they were clear of the homestead. The late afternoon sun was already casting long shadows as they reached Mineral Point and headed straight for the marshal's office. Marshal Everett listened to their account with growing concern. "Falsifying claim documents is a serious offense," he said, "but proving it is another matter entirely." "We don't need to prove it yet," Owen argued. "We just need to stop them from taking over the well tomorrow." The marshal sighed, rubbing his beard. "I can come out in the morning, try to keep the peace. But if Randall has filed what looks like a legitimate claim, my authority is limited." "That's not good enough," Lena said firmly. "Marshal, you know this is wrong. Everyone in the territory knows Randall has been squeezing out small farmers. Knowing and proving are different things, Mrs. Tucker." Owen leaned forward, his voice urgent. What about the other farmers? The ones who have been helping us, if enough of them showed up tomorrow. The marshal raised an eyebrow. A show of force that could easily turn ugly. Not force, Owen clarified. Numbers, witnesses, people who can testify later about what really happened. The marshal considered this, then nodded slowly. That might work. Randall's men are bullies, but they prefer to operate in the shadows. A public confrontation with half the county watching might not be what they want. Can you help us spread the word? Lena asked. I'll do better than that, the marshal said, standing. I'll come with you myself, and I'll bring my deputies, and I'll send word to the farmers who have been working with you. If they can get there by morning, they will. As they left the marshal's office, the sun was already setting. They would have to ride back to the farm in darkness, but both felt a renewed sense of hope. You think it will work? Lena asked as they mounted their horses. Owen reached across to squeeze her hand. It has to. We've come too far to lose now. The ride back was tense, both of them alert for any sign of Burke's men. But they reached the farm without incident, the house dark and undisturbed in the moonlight. They spent the night gathering weapons, positioning furniture for defense if it came to that, planning escape routes. Neither slept much, taking turns watching from the windows for any approach. Dawn broke clear and bright, the sun rising over the eastern hills to illuminate Lena's small farm. From the porch, they could see dust on the horizon, riders approaching from the direction of Randall's ranch. Here they come, Owen said grimly, checking his revolver one last time. Lena stood beside him, James's shotgun in her hands. No sign of the marshal yet. He'll come, Owen assured her, though his eyes kept scanning the road to town anxiously. The dust cloud grew larger, resolving into a group of riders, at least 20 men, Burke at their lead. Behind them came wagons loaded with equipment, shovels, picks, lumber. They're serious about taking the well, Lena observed, her mouth dry with fear despite her determined stance. Owen nodded. Stand your ground, don't let them intimidate you. The riders drew up in a line before the house, facing Lena and Owen on the porch. Burke rode forward, a smug smile on his face. Mrs. Tucker, Mr. Norwood, he called in greeting. I see you've decided to make this difficult. This is my land, Mr. Burke, Lena replied steadily. Every inch of it, legally claimed and worked by my husband and me. Burke waved the paper he'd shown them the day before. This document says different. Now you can step aside and let us do our work, or... He gestured to his men, several of whom patted their holstered guns meaningfully. Owen stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun. You're not taking this land or this water, not today, not ever. Burke's face hardened. Have it your way. He turned to his men. Disarm them and secure the property. Several riders dismounted and started toward the porch, hands on their weapons. Lena raised the shotgun, and Owen drew his revolver. Think carefully, Owen warned. First man who sets foot on those steps won't be taking a second step. The tension was palpable, a standoff that could explode into violence at any moment. Then, from the south, came the sound of hoofbeats, many hoofbeats. All heads turned. Riding hard down the road came Marshal Everett, his 2 deputies behind him. And behind them, a virtual army of farmers, the Abernathys, the Millers, the Harrises, and at least a dozen other families from miles around, men and women alike, all armed. Burke's men shifted nervously, suddenly outnumbered. The marshal rode directly up to Burke, his hand resting casually on his own sidearm. Morning, Burke, he said pleasantly. Seems we have a bit of a dispute here. Burke's face darkened. This is a private matter between Mr. Randall and Mrs. Tucker. Is that so? The marshal looked around at the assembled farmers, now forming a protective semicircle around Lena's property. Looks to me like the whole community has taken an interest. Burke thrust his document at the marshal. We have a legal claim to part of this land. The southeast corner was improperly marked. That's interesting, the marshal interrupted, because I have the original survey maps right here. He pulled a rolled document from his saddlebag. Certified by the Territorial Land Office yesterday evening when I sent a rider there specifically to check. He unrolled the map, displaying it for all to see. According to this, Mrs. Tucker's claim is entirely valid, no discrepancies. Burke's face flushed with anger. This is interference. No, sir, the marshal cut him off. This is law enforcement. Now, you and your men can turn around and ride back to Mr. Randall, or I can arrest the lot of you for attempted claim jumping. Your choice. For a long moment, Burke sat rigid in his saddle, eyes darting between the marshal, the assembled farmers, and Lena and Owen on the porch. Finally, his shoulders slumped fractionally. This isn't over, he growled. Mr. Randall doesn't give up what he wants. Then Mr. Randall can come talk to me personally, the marshal replied evenly. Until then, you're trespassing. Move along. With a curt gesture to his men, Burke turned his horse. The riders followed, the wagons turning clumsily to retreat down the road they'd come. A cheer went up from the gathered farmers as Burke's men disappeared over the hill. Lena sagged against Owen, the shotgun suddenly heavy in her trembling hands. We did it, she whispered, scarcely believing. Owen wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We did, he confirmed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Together. The marshal dismounted and approached the porch, a satisfied smile beneath his beard. Randall won't give up easily, he warned, but he's a businessman at heart. Once he realizes the entire community is standing with you, he'll likely move on to easier targets. Thank you, Marshal, Lena said sincerely. We couldn't have done this without you. Don't thank me, the marshal replied, gesturing to the farmers now dismounting around the yard. Thank your neighbors. They're the ones who rode out at dawn for you. The rest of the day took on a festive atmosphere, the confrontation giving way to celebration. The neighboring families, having come prepared for a fight, stayed to share food and stories. The new well provided water for all, a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the revitalized farm, Lena found a quiet moment with Owen away from the festivities. I can hardly believe it, she said, looking out over the land that was now truly hers again, the water flowing, the future bright with possibility. A month ago, I was crying beside a dry creek bed with no hope left. Owen took her hand, his eyes soft in the fading light. And now I have water, I have my farm. She turned to face him fully. And I have you. Owen's smile was warm as he drew her close. You know, when I first saw you by that creek, I thought you were the most stubborn woman I'd ever met, refusing to give up even when everything seemed lost. And now? Lena echoed his question, her arms sliding around his neck. Now I know you're the strongest, bravest person I've ever known. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. And I love you for it. The words, spoken simply but with profound sincerity, filled Lena with a joy she'd thought she might never feel again. I love you too, she whispered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him, no longer caring who might see. Stay with me. Help me build something here, something lasting. Wild horses couldn't drag me away, Owen promised against her lips. As twilight deepened around them, the sounds of their neighbors' celebration creating a backdrop of community and connection. Lena and Owen sealed their promise with another kiss, a promise of partnership, of love rekindled from the ashes of loss, of a future as boundless as the prairie sky above them. 5 years later, Mineral Point had changed in half a decade. No longer a struggling settlement on the edge of survival, It had blossomed into a thriving agricultural community. The secret of water dowsing that Owen had brought had spread throughout the county, with new wells and irrigation systems transforming once barren fields into productive farmland. The Tucker Norwood farm, as it was now known, stood as a testament to what vision and perseverance could achieve. The original well had been expanded, the irrigation system refined and extended. Fields that had once been dust now grew wheat, corn, and vegetables in abundance. Lena stood on the porch, watching as Owen demonstrated to their 3-year-old son, James, how to plant sunflower seeds along the garden border. Their infant daughter, Hope, slept peacefully in her arms, tiny fingers curled around one of Lena's. "Not too deep, Jamie," Owen was saying, his voice patient as he guided the boy's small hands. "Just like this. Then cover it gently." Lena smiled as she watched them, her heart full. The past 5 years had brought challenges. Randall had made one last attempt to claim their water rights through the territorial courts, but with the marshal's help and the community's support, they had prevailed. After that defeat, the wealthy rancher had finally turned his attention elsewhere, leaving the small farmers of Mineral Point to prosper in peace. Owen had kept his promise to stay. They had married in the small church in town, with what seemed like the entire community in attendance. Together, they had built something neither had thought possible, not just a successful farm, but a true home, filled with love and new life. Owen looked up, catching Lena's eye across the yard. The smile that spread across his face was the same one that still made her heart skip a beat, warm, genuine, a little mischievous around the edges. "Mama, look," Jamie called excitedly, holding up dirt-covered hands. "I'm planting flowers." "I see that, sweetheart," Lena called back. "They're going to be beautiful." Owen stood, ruffling their son's hair. "Why don't you finish this row while I talk to your mother for a minute?" he suggested, and the boy nodded seriously, focusing on his important task. As Owen crossed the yard to join her on the porch, Lena felt the same flutter in her stomach that had been there from the beginning, a recognition of something rare and precious found when all hope seemed lost. "How are my girls?" Owen asked, gently brushing a finger over sleeping Hope's cheek before leaning in to kiss Lena. "Perfect," Lena replied, leaning into his embrace. "Everything's perfect." Owen's arm circled her waist as they looked out over their land together. "You know, I was just thinking about the first day we met. You crying by that dry creek bed, me saying something about water somewhere ahead." Lena smiled at the memory. "You were right about the water." "I was right about a lot of things that day," Owen said, his voice soft with emotion. "But I never could have imagined all this." He gestured to encompass not just their farm, but their family, their life together. "Neither could I," Lena admitted. "I thought my story was ending that day. Instead, it was just beginning." As the summer sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, they stood together watching their son plant seeds for the future, their daughter sleeping peacefully in the present, surrounded by the life they had built from nothing but hope and determination. The creek that had once been dry now flowed strong and clear along the edge of their property, a constant reminder that even in the most barren moments of life, there is still water somewhere ahead, if only you have the courage to keep searching for it. And sometimes, Lena reflected as she leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, you find so much more than just water. Sometimes, you find everything you never knew you were looking for.